I discovered my nephew was stealing my apartment building when I found eviction notices with his signature taped to my tenants' doors. Not just any eviction notices. Official legal documents claiming non-payment of rent and violation of lease terms for tenants who'd been paying their rent faithfully to me for years. Mrs. Chin in 2B, who'd never missed a payment in 8 years. The Rodriguez family in 3A, who always paid early and helped with building maintenance. Even old Mr. Murphy in 1C, who'd lived there since 1987 and treated the building like his own home. All of them being evicted by someone who had no legal right to evict anyone. I was standing in the lobby of Riverside Manor, the 6-unit building I'd owned for 34 years, staring at legal papers signed by David Mitchell, my sister's son, the boy I'd helped raise after she died in a car accident when he was 12. The same David who'd been helping me manage the building for the past year while I dealt with my arthritis and the challenges of being an 80-year-old landlord. The same David who'd convinced me to let him handle the paperwork and deal with tenant issues so I could enjoy my retirement without worrying about building management. The same David who was now trying to empty my building so he could sell it without my knowledge or consent. But it was the sight of my own apartment door, 4A, where I'd lived for 3 decades, with a notice of lease termination due to owner occupancy requirements, that made my hands shake with something beyond betrayal. He wasn't just stealing my building. He was evicting me from my own home. The notice was dated for next Friday. 5 days to vacate the apartment I'd lived in since my husband died, using a legal justification that made no sense unless someone else now owned the property. I pulled out my phone and called David immediately. "Aunt Ruth, how are you feeling today?" "I'm feeling confused, David. I'm standing in my own building looking at eviction notices you signed." Silence. "Eviction notices? I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about the legal documents taped to every tenant's door, including mine, ordering us to vacate by Friday." "Aunt Ruth, I think there might be some misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding is how my nephew thinks he can steal my building and evict me from my own home." "I'm not stealing anything. I'm managing your property like you asked me to." "Managing my property doesn't include evicting paying tenants without my permission." "Aunt Ruth, we talked about this. About selling the building, about moving you to a more appropriate living situation." "We never talked about selling anything. We never talked about moving me anywhere. And we certainly never talked about you forging legal documents in my name." "I'm not forging anything. I have power of attorney." Power of attorney. The words hit me like ice water. "What power of attorney?" "The one you signed last month. When you were having trouble with the building management, remember? You said you wanted me to handle things legally so there wouldn't be any complications." I remembered signing papers David had brought me, but they'd been presented as property management agreements. Simple documents giving him authority to collect rent and handle maintenance issues while I recovered from a bad arthritis flare. Not comprehensive power of attorney that would allow him to sell my property and evict me from my home. "David, I never signed anything giving you authority to sell my building or evict my tenants." "Aunt Ruth, you're getting confused. The stress of property management, your arthritis medications." "I'm not confused about being evicted from my own apartment." "You're not being evicted. You're being transitioned to senior living where you'll be safer and more comfortable." Senior living. He'd already picked out where he wanted to warehouse me while he liquidated my life's work. "David, I want you at my apartment in 1 hour. Bring whatever papers you claim I signed. We're going to clear this up right now." "Aunt Ruth, I'm at work." "Then leave work. Because if you're not here in 1 hour, I'm calling the police and my lawyer." I hung up before he could respond. Standing in the lobby of my own building, reading eviction notices for apartments I'd rented to good people for decades, I felt something crystallize in my chest that had nothing to do with arthritis pain. At 83 years old, I might move slower than I used to, and I might need help with some of the physical aspects of building management. But I was still Ruth Morrison, the woman who'd bought this building when banks didn't like lending to widows, who'd maintained it through recessions and renovations, who'd provided stable housing for dozens of families over 3 decades. I was also the woman who'd raised David after his mother died, who'd paid for his college education, who'd trusted him with the thing that mattered most to me. He thought grief and arthritis had made me helpless. He was about to learn they'd made me dangerous. While I waited for David to arrive, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went through every piece of paperwork related to my building. Financial records, tenant files, maintenance contracts, insurance policies, property tax documents. Everything I'd gradually turned over to David as my arthritis made paperwork more difficult and my trust in him made delegation seem sensible. What I found was systematic and terrifying. David hadn't just been managing my building, he'd been preparing to steal it. Over the past year, he gradually moved all official correspondence to his address. Property tax bills, insurance renewals, city inspection notices, even tenant communications had been redirected away from me and toward him. He'd also been making unauthorized changes to tenant agreements. New leases with different terms, modified rent collection procedures, additional fees and requirements that I'd never approved. Most damning, he'd been corresponding with real estate agents about property valuation and market timing for a potential sale. Emails discussing asking prices, comparable properties, and optimal tenant situations for maximum sale value. All without my knowledge. All while telling me he was simply handling the paperwork so I wouldn't be stressed by building management. But the most shocking discovery was a folder labeled Transition Planning that contained documents I'd never seen before. Applications to senior living facilities in my name. Medical assessments claiming I was experiencing cognitive decline and needed supervised care. Financial evaluations suggesting I could no longer manage my own affairs. All of it building a paper trail that would justify putting me in institutional care while David took control of my assets. The power of attorney document was there too, and it was nothing like what I'd thought I was signing. Instead of simple property management authority, it was comprehensive control over my financial, medical, and legal decisions. The signature was mine, but I didn't remember signing anything so extensive. The document was dated a month ago, during a particularly bad arthritis flare when David had brought me some paperwork to handle building issues. I'd signed it while in pain, trusting him to explain what I was agreeing to, assuming it was routine property management authorization. I'd been a fool. But I'd also been documenting everything, even if I hadn't realized it at the time. Years of meticulous record-keeping, tenant communications, financial tracking, and property management logs. Evidence that would prove I'd been competently managing my building right up until David decided to steal it. When he arrived an hour later, I was ready for him. "Aunt Ruth, you look upset. Are you feeling all right?" "I'm feeling like someone who just discovered her nephew has been planning to steal her building and put her in a nursing home." "That's not what's happening. Show me the papers, David." He reluctantly pulled out a folder and spread documents across my kitchen table. The power of attorney, building transfer paperwork, and senior living applications I'd supposedly requested. "Aunt Ruth, you signed all of these. You asked me to help you transition to a situation where you wouldn't have to worry about building management anymore. I asked you to help with rent collection and maintenance scheduling. I never asked you to sell my building or put me in institutional care. But you did sign these documents. I signed what you told me were property management agreements. You didn't explain that I was giving you authority to control my entire life. The language might be comprehensive, but I'm only using the authority you wanted me to have. If that were true, you wouldn't be evicting my tenants without my permission or corresponding with real estate agents behind my back." His face went pale. How did I find out you were stealing from me?" "I went through the files you thought I was too confused to understand." "Aunt Ruth, I'm not stealing anything. I'm protecting your interests. By evicting paying tenants? By devaluing my property? By researching nursing homes I never asked to move to? By preparing for the inevitable. You're 83 years old. You can't manage a 6-unit building forever. So you decided to make that decision for me instead of discussing it with me? I decided to make preparations so that when the time comes, everything would be handled smoothly." "The time for what?" "For when you're no longer able to manage your own affairs." There it was. The assumption underlying everything he'd done. Not if I became incapable, but when. Not planning with me for my future, but planning around me for his convenience. "David, I want you to cancel those eviction notices immediately." "I can't do that." The legal process has already started. You can do it because you started it without authorization. You can undo it the same way. Aunt Ruth, you need to think about this rationally. I am thinking rationally. I'm thinking that power of attorney doesn't give you the right to make decisions I disagree with while I'm still mentally competent. But the senior living facility would be so much better for you. Says who? You? The real estate agents who want my building? The nursing home that wants my money? Says everyone who cares about your well-being. Everyone except me, apparently. The silence that followed was profound and revealing. David, I want you to stop all proceedings related to selling this building. I want you to cancel the eviction notices. I want you to transfer all building correspondence back to my name and address. I can't do that. Why not? Because contracts have been signed. Commitments have been made. The senior living facility is expecting you next month. You committed me to a nursing home without asking me? I secured you a place at a very nice assisted living community. Without my knowledge or consent? With your power of attorney authorization. Power of attorney you obtained by lying to me about what I was signing. His mask was slipping now. The concerned nephew was being replaced by someone colder, more calculating. Aunt Ruth, you're going to move to Sunset Gardens whether you like it or not. The building is going to be sold whether you agree or not. These decisions have already been made. By whom? By me. Using the legal authority you gave me. Authority I'm now revoking. You can't revoke it. The documents are legally binding. Not if they were signed under false pretenses. Good luck proving that in court. He stood up to leave, and I saw him clearly for the first time. Not the grieving 12-year-old I'd helped raise, not the grateful nephew I'd supported through college, but a man who'd calculated the value of my kindness and decided it was worth stealing. David, I called as he reached the door. What? You made one mistake in all of this planning. What mistake? You assumed I'd be too old, too confused, or too grateful to fight you. Aunt Ruth. You were wrong on all counts. After he left, I sat in my kitchen looking at the eviction notices he'd refused to cancel, the power of attorney documents he'd used to justify stealing my building, the nursing home applications he'd filled out without my knowledge. At 83, I was facing the fight of my life against someone I'd loved and trusted like a son. But I was also Ruth Morrison, and I'd been fighting for everything I had since I was 25 years old. David had no idea what he'd just unleashed. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. Margaret Chin had been handling my legal affairs for 15 years. She was also the daughter of Mrs. Chin in 2B, which meant she had a personal stake in stopping David's eviction scheme. Mrs. Morrison, my mother told me about the eviction notice. What's happening? I explained everything. The power of attorney obtained under false pretenses, the unauthorized building sale preparations, the nursing home commitment I'd never agreed to. This is serious elder abuse, Margaret said. Financial exploitation, fraud, possibly kidnapping if they try to force you into institutional care against your will. Can we stop it? We can challenge the power of attorney as invalid due to misrepresentation. We can file for emergency injunctive relief to stop the evictions. We can pursue criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. How long will that take? If we move fast, we can get a temporary restraining order within days. But Mrs. Morrison, you need to know that David will fight this. He'll claim you're mentally incompetent, that you don't understand what's in your best interests. Then we'll need to prove I'm competent. Exactly. Medical evaluation, cognitive testing, financial competency assessment. We'll need to demonstrate that you're fully capable of making your own decisions. And if David has already committed me to that nursing home, then we'll need to prove he exceeded his authority under the power of attorney. Even with POA, he can't make decisions about your living situation that you actively oppose while you're mentally competent. I spent the rest of the day gathering evidence. Financial records showing I'd been competently managing the building until David took over. Tenant files proving I'd maintained good relationships and stable rental income. Medical records showing no cognitive decline or mental health issues. But I also did something else. I started talking to my tenants. Mrs. Chin was first. Mrs. Morrison, I've been so worried about that eviction notice. My daughter says it might not be legal. It's not legal, Mrs. Chin. My nephew forged my signature and acted without my authority. But he said you were moving to a nursing home, that the building was being sold. He said a lot of things that aren't true. I'm not moving anywhere, and this building isn't being sold. Oh, thank goodness. I was so scared. We've been here 8 years. This is our home. It's your home as long as you want it to be. The Rodriguez family was next. Mrs. Morrison, we don't understand what we did wrong. We always pay rent on time. We take care of our apartment. You didn't do anything wrong. These eviction notices are fraudulent. My nephew is trying to empty the building so he can sell it without my permission. Can he do that? Not if I can stop him. Mr. Murphy in 1C was the most upset. Ruth, I've lived here since 1987. This is my home. Where am I supposed to go at my age? You're not going anywhere, Patrick. We'll fight this together. By evening, I had something David probably hadn't expected. 6 tenants who were willing to testify that they'd been paying rent faithfully, that they'd had no lease violations, that the eviction notices were retaliatory and fraudulent. I also had something else, a plan. The next morning, Margaret filed for emergency injunctive relief, requesting immediate suspension of all eviction proceedings and freezing any sale preparations for the building. We also filed a criminal complaint against David for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. But the most satisfying call I made was to Sunset Gardens, the assisted living facility David had committed me to without my knowledge. This is Ruth Morrison. I understand my nephew David Mitchell has made arrangements for me to move into your facility. Yes, Mrs. Morrison. We're so excited to welcome you. Mr. Mitchell explained that you're experiencing some cognitive difficulties and need supervised care. Mr. Mitchell lied to you. I have no cognitive difficulties, I don't need supervised care, and I never authorized him to make arrangements on my behalf. Oh, that's very unusual. He provided power of attorney documentation. Power of attorney obtained through misrepresentation. I'm calling to inform you that any arrangements made in my name are fraudulent and that I will not be moving to your facility. Mrs. Morrison, we've already prepared your room, processed your application. Then I suggest you contact Mr. Mitchell about refunding any deposits he made with money he stole from me. We'll need to review this with our legal department. You do that. And you might want to review your procedures for accepting power of attorney commitments without speaking directly to the person being committed. But I wasn't done yet. I called the real estate agents David had been corresponding with. This is Ruth Morrison. I understand you've been discussing the sale of my property at 847 Riverside Drive with my nephew David Mitchell. Yes, Mrs. Morrison. Mr. Mitchell explained that you're interested in selling due to health concerns. Mr. Mitchell exceeded his authority. I'm not interested in selling. I have no health concerns that prevent me from managing my own affairs, and any agreements made in my name are fraudulent. But he provided documentation showing he has power of attorney. Power of attorney doesn't give him the right to sell my property against my expressed wishes while I'm mentally competent. We'll need to halt all proceedings until this is clarified. That would be wise. By the end of the week, David's carefully constructed plan was unraveling. The eviction notices were suspended pending legal review. The nursing home placement was canceled. The real estate negotiations were halted. The building sale preparations were frozen by court order. But David wasn't giving up easily. He arrived at my apartment Saturday morning with 2 people I'd never seen before. Aunt Ruth, this is Dr. Williams and Ms. Foster from Adult Protective Services. They're here to do a wellness check. A wellness check. He was trying to have me declared incompetent by claiming I was endangering myself. Mrs. Morrison, Dr. Williams said, we're here because there are concerns about your ability to safely manage your living situation. What concerns? Your nephew reports that you've been confused about legal documents, making irrational accusations against family members, refusing appropriate medical care. My nephew reports a lot of things that aren't true. Would you like to see documentation proving I'm mentally competent to manage my own affairs? I showed them Margaret's assessment, my financial records, my building management documentation. Evidence of competent decision-making right up until David decided to steal my property. Mrs. Morrison, Ms. Foster said, your nephew is concerned that you're being taken advantage of by lawyers who want to create family conflict for their own profit. My lawyer is the daughter of one of my tenants. She's preventing me from being taken advantage of by a nephew who wants to steal my building for his own profit. That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact. Would you like to see the evidence? I showed them David's real estate correspondence, the unauthorized eviction notices, the nursing home commitment made without my knowledge. Dr. Williams and Ms. Foster exchanged glances. Mr. Mitchell, Dr. Williams said, these documents suggest that Mrs. Morrison has been managing her affairs competently and that her legal action may be justified. David's face went white. She's not thinking clearly. The stress of building management, her age. Her age doesn't disqualify her from making her own decisions, Ms. Foster said. And the documentation she's provided suggests she's been making them competently. But the power of attorney. Power of attorney doesn't override the principal's right to make decisions they disagree with while they remain competent. After they left, David tried one last approach. Aunt Ruth, this is getting out of hand. The legal fees, the family conflict, the stress. The stress of being stolen from by someone I trusted like a son? I'm trying to protect you. You're trying to warehouse me so you can steal my building. The building is too much work for someone your age. Then let me hire property managers. Let me make my own decisions about my own life. You're being stubborn and irrational. I'm being protective of assets I spent 30 years building. Assets that should benefit the family. There it was. The real motivation underneath all the concern about my well-being. Assets that belong to me, not to the family. But when I die, I'll decide what happens to my property. While I'm alive, it's not your decision to make. Aunt Ruth. David, I want you out of my apartment. I want you out of my building. I want you out of my life. You can't mean that. I mean it more than anything I've ever said. The look on his face was one I'd never seen before. Not hurt or confusion, but cold calculation. He'd played every card he had: concern, authority, family loyalty, outside intervention, and none of them had worked. Now he was looking at me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. This isn't over, he said as he left. Yes, it is. The legal proceedings moved faster than I'd expected. Margaret was thorough and relentless, presenting evidence of David's systematic deception and unauthorized actions. The power of attorney was invalidated due to misrepresentation. The eviction notices were declared fraudulent. David was ordered to make full restitution for legal fees, tenant damages, and canceled nursing home deposits. But the personal resolution was more complicated. David fought the charges, claiming he'd acted in my best interests based on legitimate concerns about my capacity. He produced character witnesses who testified about his devotion to me, his concern for my well-being, his history as a caring nephew. All of it true, which made the betrayal more painful, not less. The nephew who genuinely loved me had genuinely believed that stealing from me was justified because I was too old to know what was good for me. Mrs. Morrison, the prosecutor asked during his sentencing hearing, what outcome would you like to see in this case? I looked at David sitting at the defendant's table, this man I'd raised from childhood, who'd stolen my building and tried to put me in a nursing home against my will. I want him to understand that love doesn't give you the right to control someone else's life. I want him to understand that concern doesn't justify theft. I want him to understand that family relationships require consent, not just DNA. Do you want him to serve prison time? I want him to serve accountability time. Whatever that looks like. David was sentenced to probation, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. He was also banned from having any power of attorney or financial authority over elderly relatives in the future. But the most important consequence wasn't legal. 6 months later, I was still living in my apartment, still managing my building, still making my own decisions about my own life. My tenants had renewed their leases with gratitude and loyalty I'd never experienced before. They'd seen me fight for their homes as well as my own, and that created a bond that went beyond landlord-tenant relationships. Mrs. Chin brought me homemade soup when my arthritis flared up. The Rodriguez family helped with building maintenance without being asked. Mr. Murphy appointed himself my unofficial security guard, checking on me daily and watching for any signs of further family interference. I'd lost a nephew but gained a chosen family. David tried to reconcile several times, calling with apologies and explanations that always ended with suggestions that I should reconsider my living situation for my own good. I stopped taking his calls after the third one. Some relationships can't survive the discovery that love was conditional on compliance, that concern was really control, that family meant ownership rather than affection. 1 year later, I'm still in my apartment, still managing my building, still making my own decisions about my own life. At 84, I move a little slower and need a little more help with some tasks. I've hired a property management company to handle maintenance and repairs. I've installed grab bars in my bathroom and a medical alert system for emergencies. All things I chose to do at my own pace, for my own reasons. The difference between getting older and being managed is consent. I consented to the changes I made. I never consented to being stolen from, evicted, or warehoused. David learned the hard way that power of attorney isn't power over attorney. That concern doesn't equal control. That family doesn't mean ownership. I learned something too, that fighting back at 83 is possible, worthwhile, and sometimes necessary. My building is thriving. My tenants are secure. My independence is intact. Most importantly, my dignity is mine. At 84, I'm exactly where I choose to be, making decisions I choose to make, with people who respect my right to choose. Some inheritances are financial. Others are the knowledge that you're stronger than people assume, smarter than they expect, and more determined than they plan for. David thought he was inheriting my building. Instead, he inherited the knowledge that some people will fight for their freedom no matter how old they are, no matter who tries to take it away. That's a legacy worth more than any apartment building. That's a lesson worth learning at any age.